Darren Levine here at Media Hill, Bobby with Bird Commentary, for the Panasonic GH4. And its headline feature is, of course, its 4K video recording ability. It is priced at $1,700, $1,800 in that range, so it is a bit pricey compared to other M43 format cameras. M43 format, whether you like it or not, it's got pluses and minuses. I like it for the reason that I can get a deeper depth of field if I need it, but still get a shallower depth of field if I want that too. Of course, it's not gonna get you full frame depth of field, but I don't care for that most of the time anyways. So let's just get right into it, because it's very similar to the GH3. There's no sense in going over all the GH3 similar type of stuff. But suffice it to say, it records 4K internally. May only be 8-bit 420, but as we know with many other cameras, 8-bit 420 can look pretty darn good, and this is no exception. And it is also looking like it resolves plenty of detail. Some older DSLRs, they wouldn't resolve all the detail they're supposed to. This looks like it's at or close to the 4K mark in terms of overall lines of resolved detail, or pixels resolved. So quick layout, you got a dial here for different frame shooting, you got a dial here for all your typical DSLR type stuff. You got a dial here, you got a dial over here, all that standard stuff. Get a little remote port there, which is nice. You get a mic port, which is nice. Get a headphone port, which is nice. Okay, all that stuff out of the way. How's the motor and aliasing? Looks solid. In my real world-ish test, it looked like it performed plenty good, and unless you got some serious scenes there with really micro detail, I don't think you'll have an issue with it. So that looks really nice. How is the low light performance of it? That's probably my least favorite aspect. It is not bad, but it is not great. Up to ISO 1600 looked pretty darn good. Even the highest at 6400 in video mode didn't look terrible, but that's one of the things I'm looking for is a camera that could get a solid 3200. I mean solid, you know, not just, you know, it's usable. I want a really solid 3200 ISO, but that's just my particular wants, needs, etc. So ISO performance, noise, low light, decent. If you're looking for a low light camera, probably not going to be this. But let's go over lenses, because that actually is an area where it helps. Now, one of the really nice things about the M43 system is that you can adapt a ton of different lenses to it. But one of the issues is that you're obviously getting a big crop factor, because if you're using a full frame lens, this is half the size of that image circle, so you're getting a 2 times crop factor. But Metabones came out with this, the Speed Booster. It's a focal reducer, and it just means it's taking that bigger image circle and shrinking it down to the smaller format, giving you a more proper field of view. Great, widens up the lens. Great other side effect, it speeds up the lens because it's shrinking that image size down to a smaller size. You're getting about a stop extra of light. Pretty cool. The one other thing I should mention is that I really like the M43 because of that crop factor, because I really like getting them tight with telephoto for wildlife, like shooting birds that aren't perfectly stationary 2 feet away from me. They're usually in the trees and clouds. So that's really nice. I like the flexibility of that. Let's talk about the profiles on this camera, because it's one of the most powerful things they added. I have not seen this level of profiling ability on a DSLR, which is really great. But what problem it could cause is if you're used to just regular DSLRs and you're used to just going to a neutral profile and dialing the contrast down to get it all the way flat, if you take that same mentality and apply it to this and you zero everything out as much as possible, you're gonna find it's way too flat. Skin turns to plastic, the low light noise or the shadow noise is just disgusting. Okay, that's a little much, but you get the drift. It can go too flat. So you really should look online and look at other samples of what people have done, because there's a lot of different possibilities with this. I've found my middle ground that I kind of like to work with. The Cinelike D is already a flat profile. If you compare that with the Cinelike V, which is the pre-graded kind of look, even if you were to dial down the contrast of Cinelike V all the way, it's still not even as flat as Cinelike D at zero contrast, or rather neutral contrast, not dialed down, just in the middle. So I don't even dial down the contrast on Cinelike D. I usually maybe just do a notch under, do a 1 or 2 notches of the curves. Eye dynamic range, that feature, it's interesting. It actually works better than I thought. Anything with like the little auto kind of adjustments, kind of skeptical of, but tried it back and forth and I kind of liked what I was seeing. So I've been using that either on low or standard. Still not man enough to go and try it on high. I don't know. I don't like those auto things that I'm not exactly sure what it's doing at a particular point in time, but it does look like it's a pretty nice feature. So how does that 100 megabit hold up under high motion scenes? Because of course, too much motion and not enough bits can give you macro blocking and muddy up the image quite a bit. I found it did perform quite well. Wasn't immune to it, but it does hold together better than you might expect. How's the rolling shutter? Not bad, but not great. It's falling in the middle somewhere in terms of performance compared to other cameras. Doesn't look like it's as good as, say, a Canon C camera, but not as bad as some of the other earlier DSLRs. So pretty decent and probably gonna work for many situations, but if you like shaky cam type of stuff, you might wanna go and test it for your own needs. I don't wanna get into 1080 too much because, well, 4K is kind of its big feature. And many people have found that instead of shooting the nice 1080 200 megabit mode, shoot the 4K and down res because you get a nice crisper image. So that's one thing to consider. One of the other nice things with the 1080 is you can do it in up to 96 frames per second slow motion. Some of you have probably tried 60 frames per second, which is available on many cameras, but 96 is a nice bump up and get some nice slowed down action. So that's pretty cool. Another nice built-in feature, time-lapse. You don't need a remote timer, it does it right in the camera, which is really nice. It's pretty easy to work with too. You just set how many pictures you want to take and the interval of how to take them, like, you know, 1 a second, 1 every 2 seconds, etc., etc. And you can even set it to start at a certain time and end at a certain time. So you can set it up in your hotel room and leave and it'll turn off automatically, turn on automatically, and do everything for you even though you're gone. So that's pretty cool. So how is the monitoring? EVF, nice and crisp. It's got a nice magnification. It's got the diopter. I do wish you could tilt up a bit so I can shoot like that. But for shooting low or high, obviously you got the swivel out screen, which I love the swivel out screens, which every camera would do that. This one is also nice and high resolution. It's a bit small. It was decent to work with. In daylight, it actually was quite nice despite its reflective nature. It was pretty good at, you know, not being complete rubbish in direct sunlight or overall bright scenes. So that is pretty good. It is a touchscreen. I'm not a fan of touchscreens, but you don't need to use a touchscreen if you don't want to. You got plenty of dials and buttons and rotaries and everything to switch to if you want. Is it worth that price? Well, it's kind of the only game in town in the interchangeable lens 4K arena. They came out with a fixed lens FC1000 4K camera. That's got other limitations. You got the AX100 at $2,000, but that's got limitations. It's not interchangeable. And the AS7 from Sony, it's a bit more expensive, but you can't even shoot internally 4K without an extra $2,000 of the Atomos Shogun, which is the only recorder that's available right now for 4K. So this kind of is the only game in town, and not surprising that it's selling like hotcakes. I spend a decent amount of time with it. It is not actually my camera. There's a good buddy of mine, Kevin's, and he needs it back right away to start shooting a film with it. So while I did start to get comfortable with it and felt good about it, I wish I did have more time to dissect it a bit more. But I did like what I saw, and if it weren't for the low light, I might be very tempted to buy one of my own. I'm kind of biding my time sitting on the sidelines waiting for my next camera. The C100 and RX10, perfectly good for my needs. 4K is not a need for me. It's just, you know, a progression desire. So I'm biding my time and waiting around. So this one is nice as it is. I probably won't get one for myself. Might just rent one occasionally, but you should take a look at it, see if it works for you. And the bird is uninterested as usual. So I'll say I'm Darren Levine at Media Halo, and take care.